going back to, is all truth God's truth? Is part of that evolution occurred? Well, sure looks that way. Now, what that means is a totally different question, but sure looks that way.
Is all truth God's truth?
Is all truth God's truth? See, I'm sitting here wondering, okay, what's behind that question?
In other words, a psychological truth, a sociological truth.
Well, I would divide it this way. Here's the way I approach that statement. I'm a little less variegated than that. When I hear it, I think, is truth that we gain from the natural world, there's that kind of truth. And by natural world, I mean the world we experience it in, our world, and also our abilities to experience that world, our senses, okay, our five senses, all right? So I would say yes, if something is true in the natural world, if it's really true, in other words, I'm not misinterpreting, how I experience something in this world, taking that off the table. If I'm experiencing it correctly with my senses, and that this is truly a part of the natural world as it's created to be or as it is now, okay, I can go with that. In the spiritual world, that's the other category, the things that do not conform to my experience or my senses or the tools of science. So I tend to block these things into two categories, which would lead me off the cuff to say yes. Now, problem. What about the fallen world? Because all I'm experiencing is the fallen world. Well, that doesn't really force me to say no, because it kind of changes the question. And the question is, am I supposed to be able to discern how God wanted the world originally or as it is now? What does God expect of me? Because that becomes a factor in whether I assign truth to it or not. And you can go through that exercise and, okay, well, maybe I got to peel this off, and maybe my yes now is a qualified yes. Okay, I get that. When I usually get into these things, it's like you reach a point, at least I do, where if part of the question is asking me to sort of assess the accuracy of my answer from God's perspective, like am I violating anything that God would say? I would say this: God knows what he's dealing with, me. In other words, he knows my imperfections. He knows I'm not omniscient. So if God has realistic expectations, his response to my answer will probably be a little bit different than if you think he has unrealistic expectations, like he expects me to be him. I don't think he does. So to the best of my ability, being honest before God, I'm going to process this world the best way I can. If it's really true, like later in this course, we're going to hit the Adam and Eve problem. Let's just use that for an example. If you're listening to the podcast, I did a 2-part interview with Josh Swamidas, okay, who lives in Missouri. And Josh is a geneticist, and we had a discussion, in 2 parts. You can go listen to it. My hope is that Josh will be here, maybe not physically present, but on Zoom or something in a Q&A for you guys. I'm trusting him that he's committed as a believer to telling the truth and that his science is good. That's pretty much the best I can do, because I'm not omniscient. So going back to, is all truth God's truth? Is part of that evolution occurred? Well, sure looks that way. Now, what that means is a totally different question, but sure looks that way. So how do we parse that? How do we find the relationship of that to the truth of Scripture? Okay, you're still dealing with the two realms, and this is the difficulty. I have problems here because I'm limited. Okay, I also have problems here because I'm limited, maybe even more severely. So in theory, sure, I would say yes, and I would feel good about my answer if I, knew more than I did, but I'll still go with it.